Good afternoon from sunny Buffalo, New York, everyone. My name is Andy Deyell, and I am your Vice President for Institutional Advancement, and you are tuning in for another episode of Conversations with Canisius, our regular web series where we check in with alumni all over the United States and see what they've been up to since their time here at 1180 Delaware. I am joined today by a very special guest all the way from New York City, Mr. Jim Shehan from the class of 1978. Jim, how are you?
I'm fine, Andy, and thanks for asking me to do this with you. It's sunny
Absolutely.
here as well.
Good, right? Jim is the chair of FDA regulatory practice at Lowenstein Sandler LLP, located in Midtown Manhattan. And Jim, before we go backwards and talk a little bit about your youth and how you found out about Canisius High School, tell me, what does a chair of FDA regulatory practice do?
Yes, so this is about a 375 lawyer firm, and we have a pretty active practice in what we call the life sciences area, which means drugs, medical devices, a little bit of food, animal drugs, things that are regulated by FDA. So I'm the person who's in charge of the aspects of food and drug regulatory law, which is a whole specialized body of law. That's about half of what I do. About half of what I do is more familiar lawyer work, writing contracts, negotiating deals, generalized advice.
Got it. So, and we'll catch up to how you sort of became chair of FDA regulatory practice in a few minutes. But right now, let's set the stage. Let's go back. If you're class of 1978, that means in 1974, you're looking at schools in Western New York. How did you hear about Canisius and sort of what made you choose the path there for high school?
Yes, so I had little choice about Canisius. I'm one of seven children, five who were older, three of the older ones were boys. The oldest one went to Timon, which was near where we grew up in South Buffalo. But then the next two were at Canisius, and by the time I came around, it was just preordained, and the same thing for my younger brother, who was 3 years behind me. And yeah, obviously, because although those brothers were quite a bit older, like 12 and 10 years, I knew about the school, but not as much as you would from a sibling who was much closer in age.
Sure. And so at Canisius, who were some of your big influences on the faculty, teachers that stood out to you, and coaches maybe that had an impact on you?
Yes, there was Father Paul Nauman, taught English, and I loved that class. My family will tell you I still occasionally recite poems that I was forced to memorize and recite in class because you never knew if you're going to be called on. So that always I remember. I ultimately went on to science in high school. I remember Russ White was our chemistry teacher, and things were probably a little freer in those days. We used to light more things on fire and make more things blow up. That was a fun class. Mrs. Johnson was the French teacher, and I really enjoyed that too. Coach Coach Magner, I swam for 4 years and was very close with Ed Magner, who was not a teacher. He taught in Cheektowaga, would come in to coach, and was there for many years, if not decades.
That's great. I had Paul Nauman as well, and still remember a lot of those poems that he taught me as well. And when I became an English teacher later in life, I tortured my students the same way he tortured us. And I say that with a smile on my face because he was also one of my favorites. What a great teacher.
I think there's just so much value in being able to memorize something like that.
Sure. And so tell us a little bit about your journey since Canisius High School. Where'd you go for undergraduate? How did you fall into becoming an attorney? Like what were some of the sparks there? And take us up to your present day and your assignment, because I know I know you tried retiring, many years ago, and that didn't work out. So tell us a little bit about your path and how you ended up at Lowenstein Sandler.
Yeah, so out of Canisius, I went to Columbia College in New York City, uh, which was largely my choice. I did the research. Um, I had a desire to be in New York, probably come from a couple visits there with Boy Scouts, and one of those older Canisius brothers went to Fordham. So I'd been to the city once or twice, and he was living in the city then. And went to Canisius or went to Columbia, absolutely loved it. Um, and I was a biology major there with a French concentration. I was a walk-on to the swim team, which was interesting because Columbia was a Division I program uh, that was loaded with very good swimmers. And yeah, while Canisius, while we always used to win the Monsignor Martin League, we were the only team in the league with a pool, and the competition level was pretty low. Uh, um, and out of college, I ended up in law school, but it was not like it was some burning lifelong ambition. It was more, to be frank, I needed something to do. um, and Originally, I was pre-med, which my parents wanted me to be a doctor because they already had one son who was a lawyer. Um, and um, I started on that path and decided I didn't really want to do it, even right up until the point of actually taking the MCATs.
Hmm.
Um, and Ended up applying to law school, and almost serendipitously, I thought I was going to be on a gap year, but one of the schools, Georgetown, um, reached out and said, you don't have to come the following year. You can be in this year's class. And I decided to kind of do that. And even though it resulted in me not having any of the money that I thought I would need to go to law school. Um, and Georgetown, it was an interesting experience. I'd say I liked it much less than I liked Columbia College or Canisius High School. And part of that was the physical environment. The Georgetown Law School uh, was a single building in a rather rough area of our nation's capital at the time. Now it's all gentrified. And we had 700 students in a single building. And so it was kind of overcrowded and not particularly pleasant.
Mhm.
Um, I ended up going from there to the Food and Drug Administration, largely because I had that biology background, and they were recruiting and they were looking for someone with a science background. And I went there, and that became my career. Decided it was very interesting, kind of the intersection of policy and science. And I was fortunate in that the role was part legal, part policy, and that I was working in the commissioner's office, not in the office of the chief counsel. And it opened a lot of doors. I was 24 years old when I started, and
Wow.
uh, within 8 months, they were sending me to give a speech in Munich, and um, I was part of a three-person delegation with the U.S. trade rep to the UK to negotiate drug prices. It was pretty nice. And I ended up staying in that life sciences, drug and device world from then on. Uh, I left FDA after a couple of years, did about 2 years in a big DC law firm, where, you work a lot, get a bit of training in the craft. Um, and I've been very interested in some of the companies that I was coming into contact with. And I thought it was, the thought of developing products that, had a real impact in the world was very appealing to me. And when Pfizer came recruiting after 2 years at the law firm, I decided to make the move. They were offering, a position in their law department to work in regulatory and corporate, and it was nice. Right, yeah, and I was at Pfizer, which was a good place to be at the time. It was not. It was one of the kind of like smaller second 10 larger firms at the time. It had been through kind of a dry spell. And I came in when they were starting to um, bring to market a lot of kind of interesting products. A heart drug called Cardura, Zithromax, which is an antibiotic that a lot of people are familiar with. It's still one of the leading ones. Antidepressants, antifungals, and it was also a company that had medical devices. It made food additives. It made animal drugs. It had cosmetics. It was pretty interesting, and I was liking life there. And then another recruiter called, offering a position at a small company where I would have a much nicer title, but kind of taking the risk because it was a smaller entity that seemed to be kind of struggling.
Right.
And that company was Novo Nordisk, which today is the most valuable company in Europe based on stock market value. At the time, it was the leading insulin maker in Europe. And as I mentioned, trying to get its footing in the US, there were about 100 people working there compared to, I don't know, I think Pfizer had like 12,000 at the time I left it. And I ended up staying there 20 years. And that's, kind of although I've gone on to other things, it's been kind of the pinnacle of my career. Um, it became the leading insulin or diabetes company worldwide in the time I was there. And a few weeks after I started, I got a call from a Danish colleague who I'd never met, who asked me to work on an in-licensing deal. And that's the product that ultimately became Victoza, which is kind of the forerunner of Ozempic and Wegovy, the diabetes and weight loss drugs that are, all over the media and popular culture today, because the weight loss is so significant and the other health benefits that they're offering. And it was 20 years there. I became general counsel, meaning I was, the top lawyer for North and South America, and for a time, really the global company as well. And I branched out. I started a government affairs and public policy function. I was head of corporate quality. I had the intellectual property under me, and even if for a time had a couple people who were selling bulk non-medicine insulin for like laboratories and things. And it was a great experience seeing a company grow from almost nothing to thousands and thousands of employees and billions of sales. And
And
as you alluded to,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, as you alluded to, then I retired in 2011, 2012, actually ended 2012.
And so, I've talked to some gentlemen in this doing these interviews, and there's a similar theme. Usually they retire at the top of their game, and then retirement only lasts for a few weeks, months, or a year, because they still have a lot of juice. And so this is something somebody came and got you, I'm assuming, because you still had a particular, you're talking about a very specific skill set, and probably hard to find, and you probably thought you were going to retire, and before you knew it, you're probably a consultant somewhere, and then back to full-time work. So tell me a little bit about that part, process for you.
Yeah, you kind of nailed it, Andy. I was, after a month or so, I found as I was, still reading the same trade press and following the industries I was involved in. And then someone, asked me to work on a project or two. And, I started thinking I would go back and do something perhaps at a smaller company. And it was when I was making inquiries about that a law firm reached out that had lots of people that I knew. Uh, Actually, the person who had hired me at FDA in 1985 was there, and like a day or two later, called back and said, "Why don't you come and work, at our law firm and become a food and drug lawyer again?" And I originally literally like laughed, saying, "No, I stopped doing that decades ago." But then I thought about it and gave it a try.
Yeah.
And God, now here it is, what, a dozen years later, and I'm
Yeah.
still doing it.
Totally. That's great.
Yeah.
You obviously get a lot of satisfaction and a feeling of efficacy from your work. And I think that's, and as we make our way through life, we really want to feel useful. We really want to feel like we're making a difference. We really want to feel that we're providing something, a service, or being of service. And I think something tells me that in the last 12 years, that feeling for you hasn't gone away. You think you grow up through this whole system of, and okay, when I get to 60, whatever, I'm going to retire. Then you realize that, I don't want to retire. I still like what I do. I still have more to give. And especially if it's a great lesson also in keeping together and keeping up with contacts as you move through your professional career, because you never know when those contracts are going to sort of reemerge in your life. And so as you think about it, you've been back out of retirement for 12 years. I would say you're very bad at retirement, Jim. What do you think about when you think about the future, and you think about sort of how much longer do you think you'll be doing this, or do you even think like that?
Yeah, you do think about it, I think, more as the years go by. But the interesting thing about this business, it's not like you're a professional football player or something, and things just run out. Here, there's a certain advantage that comes with experience. Um, I I probably say I'll do this particular stuff 5 years or so.
Yeah.
Um, I'm on the board of one private company and a couple of nonprofits, and I'll probably expand more in that area as time goes by. Um, I'm trying to spend more of my time here. I have a mentoring role with some of the younger associates, lawyers who are just starting out. That's very fulfilling. Um, and it is nice because you're still helping companies bring products to market, and a lot of that stuff is just really fulfilling if you know work with someone for a few years and they're like, wow, FDA just approved this.
Wow. It's great.
Uh,
As you look
so I
back,
don't have a clear answer.
well, you're also a very young guy. I mean, you retired for your first retirement. You must have been extremely young, to be retired.
I
And
was I was 51, yes.
sure, sure. So, As you look back on your career, what are some of the lessons maybe you learned at Canisius High School that helped sustain you through your time, or some of the takeaways from your education there?
Uh, yeah, so good question. First I'd say on the academic side, uh, Canisius was, wonderful training for going on to university and grad school.
Hmm.
And that, you learned how to be a student, first of all, how to apply yourself. I also thought at the time the school was very good at teaching us how to communicate, both written and orally. You had to get up and speak, and you had to write clearly, or you weren't going to do very well in school. So that's, the academic side. But then I'm more holistically, being part of a community, having a sense of responsibility for others around you. That clearly was a lifelong lesson.
That's great. And as you think about some advice maybe that you might want to give uh, to our young alums, one of the things we do with these videos is we make sure that our alums can see themselves in our other alums, right? Like what are the choices for my career? What could I be? How do I get that? How do I do that? So when a lot of these young kids who are either still here at Canisius or are just getting out of college and starting to make their careers, are always looking for advice from our alumni, our successful alumni. So what are one or two things that you could share with some young people today about sort of how to go about being successful in their career?
Hmm. Yeah, because if I think about people that I know who have been successful, um, couple hallmarks. One would be most people in that, learning is a lifelong thing.
Sure.
You don't just stop and say, well, I'm good at this. I came out of school and I'm a meteorologist and I'm just going to stick with that. You have to, keep up with the times and keep on learning new skills. For me, a lot of that is, I still read, listen to podcasts and books a lot more than I used to, but I just spend a lot of time, taking in information. A little bit of technology aspect to that too. I've tried to, any new tech, I at least sample it, and AI is pretty fascinating right now. The other thing is, you have to be a positive person. You don't see a lot of people who are always, pessimistic about things. That's not the person who's going to get a lot of others to follow them.
Mm.
Um, and I guess the third thing is, be flexible, be adaptable. You the only thing you really own with any certainty is the past. You don't know what's going to come in the future. So, um, be prepared. Life will change your plans.
I really like what you said about the positivity piece. I've done a lot of these interviews. I'm not sure I've heard it expressed quite that way, but that really got my attention. Like, if you're going to be a successful person, really does have to have a very positive mindset, a glass half full type of mindset, and not only to push themselves through their work, but as you were mentioning, to get others to follow you. If you want to become a leader in the business world or in any world, really, a positive mindset is a big part of that. So that's all good advice, but that one particularly I thought was very something I hadn't heard before. So that's very, very, very good. So thank you very much, Jim, for just spending some time with us, a few minutes, and just taking us through your career. I know that was a very short time to explain a very long career, but we really, really appreciate it. And we hope that next time you're on campus or in the Buffalo area, I'm not sure how often you make it back to Buffalo, but we would love to have you here on campus and taking a tour and seeing all the great things that we're doing here at 1180. But thank you again for spending so much time with us and for giving us a sneak peek into your career and the great advice that you gave. And we'll see you soon.
Well, Andy, thank you for taking the time. I do make it back to Canisius at least every other time when I'm in Buffalo. And love to see the job that you and all the other people there at 1180 are doing.
Great.
Go Crusaders.
Go Crusaders. We look forward to seeing you really soon, Jim. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.